Well, just a few early comments. You know, this is the governor's last State of the State. He served 8 years. He should be thanked for those 8 years of service. But, you know, he laid out some things that were really sort of poking a finger in our eye, different things that are not going to happen, and we're not going to go there. And so what we want to do is focus on the things that unite us. And so we're going to work on a tax bill that's good for Minnesota. It's going to focus on growth and opportunity. We're going to work on fixing the MNLARS program, the DMV debacle. We're going to look at elder care and how do we make sure that that is taken care of. So there's a number of issues that we know we can work on, but we're going to move our agenda forward. And so the things that divide us, that the governor talked about, they're just not going to happen. So when we're looking at safe and secure schools, we're going to focus on hardening the target. We're going to make sure that we focus on mental health, that there's resources available. But when you talk about guns on either side of that issue, the fact is that's just not going to get anywhere. And so, you know, I'm thankful for the things that we can agree with the governor. We'll focus on those, and those will be the things that Minnesota will be proud of that we got done.
Let's just switch spots. Step over.
Well, you know, I think this was the governor's last State of the State. We certainly are honored to have him here, and while we may disagree on many issues, I think this session will be filled with things that we actually can work on together. A lot of the problems that face Minnesotans right now are going to take both parties coming together, and I'm fairly optimistic that we can accomplish many of those. When we look at tax conformity, I think everybody wants to get that accomplished. You know, when we look at solving the opioid crisis, or at least starting to solve that problem, you know, there's many other issues that really Minnesotans care a lot about that are not partisan issues that we know we can work on together this session, and I'm very optimistic that we can and we will. Things like safer schools and, as I mentioned, our opioid crisis. So we're committed to doing that work, to rolling up our sleeves and getting those things done, and we're going to work with the governor to accomplish those things in his final session with us.
Yeah.
Let's let Joyce speak, and then we'll take some questions. Go ahead.
You know, I enjoyed listening to the governor's speech. It was great to hear his his final farewell speech, and it made me reflect upon the things that have happened in the last few years. And really, the bottom line is the state of the state is we're in really good shape. Our tax cuts have worked. The economy is doing really well. We have record unemployment, more jobs than workers, and we're doing really well. And we like to think that we led the tax portion of that, but largely we've worked together to get a lot of things accomplished for the state of Minnesota.
Let me add one more thing. Hold on. I forgot my line. Everybody wants to know the state of the state, right? So from our perspective, the state of the state is good. It's very strong. Minnesotans are experiencing great effects from the tax relief passed in Washington, great effects from the tax relief passed by Republicans here in Minnesota last year. And as a result of that, our Minnesota budget now has a surplus. We've seen a $600 million turnaround from a deficit to a surplus because of that tax relief, because we invested in Minnesotans, and Minnesotans have invested back in our economy, and we think that's just an awesome thing. And we think we're going to make that a priority this session and in the future, making sure that we put Minnesotans first, working families first, and we know that that will also create a win-win for the state of Minnesota, and we'll see more revenue because of it. All right, Hauser.
Is the Minnesota Care buy-in one of those examples of a thing that you're not going to agree on?
You must not look at my tweets. So I sent one out that said that Minnesota Care for All is a non-starter. And the reason being is for that to work, they have to lower the reimbursement rate to our local hospitals and providers. If everybody had Minnesota Care, all of our local hospitals and providers would go out of business. And so that's just not the solution. What is the solution is focusing on the ways to drive down the health care costs. We had Senator Jensen and Senator Klein and a number of other senators get together and work on the issues that can drive down the cost. We're going to have a number of bills coming forward out of the Senate that do drive down the cost, and that's going to be our goal. Everybody wants great health care, but they also want to focus on how do they get it less expensive. The ideas that we're going to put forward will work on those things.
What were you and the Lieutenant Governor talking about so much up there?
You know,
she's president. She's president of the Senate.
I wasn't talking with the Lieutenant Governor. I don't know what you're talking about. No, we certainly, it's difficult for us to hear up there, actually, so we would ask each other, what did he say? What did he say? It's the one place in the chamber where you actually can't hear very well the person who's in front of you speaking, and you can't see their face or read their lips, so it's difficult to hear up there, so that's what we were chatting about.
Was the tone of the speech and the tone of the reaction different this year than it had been in previous years?
You know, I think I sensed, and that's why I'm somewhat optimistic, I sense that the governor really wants to get some things accomplished, and he understands that there are going to be ideological differences between himself and us. You know, he's experienced that in the past, we have, but you know, I loved his finishing line. He talked about the Capitol, and look what we accomplished when we work together, and imagine what we can accomplish if we continue to work together. And I think that sets a great tone for the session, and we're committed to doing exactly that. I can't sign a bill into law, and the governor can't pass a bill. So we have to do this together, and I think Minnesotans expect that, and that's really you know, the Minnesota way.
Any surprises from any of you?
You know, not necessarily. I think he hit on a few things that are going to be his priorities this session. I think a lot of those will also be our priorities. But I think if we look at the areas where we can agree, we can get a lot done. I would expect a tax conformity package. He talked about tax fairness for Minnesotans. We agree. We want to make sure that our tax code is fair, and we want to make sure it's competitive. We want to make sure that Minnesotans have an opportunity to prosper and do well for their families, for their small businesses, for their employees. We think when when Minnesotans do well, the state does well, and we've seen that in recent months with our newfound budget surplus. We gave some money back to Minnesotans. They're doing well. They rewarded us by investing in our economy, and now the state's doing well because of it. So it's a great lesson.
Yeah, one thing about the budget surplus too. Since the February forecast, we got another month of information, and we're another 32 million above that. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. But the other thing I'll say is look to last year to see how this year is going to be. Last year we accomplished so much together, the House and Senate working together, and the governor signing our bills. We had the most significant tax relief we've had in a decade, the most significant roads and bridges funding that was a decade, the tax bill was a couple decades. We passed over $1 billion of education funding with reforms, and that's the part that we've always been pushing for. We need reforms. What is it that we can do better? Let's adopt those. And so many things that we did last year, let's expect the same kind of cooperation this year, and it'll turn out to be a really good year. Joyce?
The question was, well, I think one of the questions was about what was a surprise. I was surprised that the governor actually asked for more capital investment funding for the University of Minnesota and for the schools than were even requested. That surprised me, that he would go above and beyond what the request even was.
Was there anything that he left out of the speech that you were expecting? Are you disappointed that he didn't get to some issues?
No, I think he hit on his legacy items. I wasn't surprised. He's often talked about education and water quality being his top priorities or his legacy items, so I was expecting him to talk about that, so it was interesting to see what his ideas were on that.
I want to add in on that. I actually was expecting the governor tonight to talk about him wanting to increase taxes this session, and I think it was actually good that he didn't say that. You know, I was fully expecting him to pitch tax increases tonight, and he did not. And I think that's speaks well that he understands how we got the surplus that we have right now, and the fact that he doesn't want to turn that back around into a deficit by increasing taxes on Minnesotans.
Or that he won't get you to vote for it.
Well, it also is you know, dead on arrival, but we're not going to spend our time having that debate, right? You know, I think we can talk about what's actually going to help Minnesota families, help Minnesota businesses, and help Minnesotans prosper. And increasing taxes on Minnesotans right now, when we've seen such a stark turnaround from a deficit to a surplus because we put some money back into Minnesotans' pockets, I think is a great example of leadership. And frankly, I think it's good that he doesn't want to waste time talking about things that just aren't going to happen.
He seemed to be saying, though, that business taxes, business tax cuts he's not interested in. He only wants to focus on relieving the individual Minnesota taxpayers that might be burdened by the federal changes. How do you react to that?
Could you repeat that one more time? Sorry.
He seemed to be saying that he was not interested in any further business tax relief. How do you react to that?
So, as far as the governor not being interested in more business taxes, you saw what the federal government did. You saw an immediate uptick in our economy, and a bunch of that was related to the business property tax, or not property tax, but just business tax relief and tax relief for all. And so we're going to explore every issue. What is it that will bring growth and prosperity to our state, and let's do that. And so related to business, we're going to be open to that. We have a number of our business community that talk about, for example, Section 179 is something that the ag community and the business community is talking about, but we're all going to work together on it. And if that's something that we can agree on, then we'll do, and if not, we'll just have to, we'll see where it ends up.
And I would just add that, recall last year more than half of our tax cuts were on individuals and not on businesses. So we did have the majority of tax cuts last year. We did have the majority of tax cuts last year that did focus on individuals. It went for farmers, for veterans, for students, for dependents, for seniors. Yeah. So the majority of our tax bill that we've done in the past has been for individuals. So, and that, I guess, we're in alignment.
You know, and the House and Senate haven't talked yet about what we want to do specifically, but we are hoping that something related to the tax brackets is done, you know, that we find a way to drive all tax brackets down, or at least income, you get more income before you pay the next tax bracket up. And so, but we want to help every single Minnesotan. That's our goal. And I don't care really whether it's a business or an individual, we want to help all of them. One last thing I'll say is you think about if we conform to the federal tax bill, if we just conform, that increases taxes roughly $500 million a year. That's the part that we don't want to do. We want to conform, but make sure that Minnesotans, both business and individual, are not going to pay more taxes in Minnesota as a result of us conforming.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.